نعم تفضل.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا تسليما أما بعد. This is the third class.
Third class.
The third class in which we name the class coping, dealing, and healing from mental, spiritual, and physical illnesses. Islamic Treatment 101. And we named it this, we said, from the series that we did for about 2 months here and upstate New York, Amrad al-Qulubi, sicknesses of the heart. And we first want to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has blessed us with the opportunity to deal, cope, and heal, as this is what the month of Ramadan is all about. Dealing, coping, healing, treating the heart, treating the believer as the believer will be tried in this life with many things, and what we find on the rise, as the Prophet ﷺ prophesied, mental illness, abuse of intoxicants, and believe it or not, with all of that going on and other things that affect the society at large, physical ailments as well. We've never seen so much in the history of mankind, so many different types of mental illnesses, not just in the adults, but even in the children. We've never seen so much in the history of mankind's spiritual illnesses. It relates to the sins and the plagues that are connected to a person's heart spiritually, which also have a physical and a mental ramification. Again, not only in the adults, but you find this in children. And then we have not, lastly, but not least, seen so much in the history of mankind, physical ailments, pardon me. So many physical ailments, so many sicknesses that each clinic, each treating center, each hospital, they stay full, subhanAllah. So this is something that I want to bring to the Muslim community at large, hoping that the stigmatism that this does not happen to us because we believe, the stigmatism that we have the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the way of the companions, we are okay. The stigmatism that if someone has been tested with a mental or substance illness, that this means that they should not get help. This means that they are from the worst of people and they should be in the closet, embarrassed, and no way out. Stigmatism. So we want to bring this issue in light of the month of Ramadan, which was approaching a couple of months back that we started this, because it's connected. As the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, Al-Qalbu Malakul A'da'i, that the heart is the king of the limbs. That the heart is the king of the limbs. And that king of the limbs is also also connected to mental as well as spiritual, and you are affected also physically when you deal with these three categories. The heart is the main thing. That's what Prophet said, Allah wa hiya al-qalb, is not it, the heart. إذا صلح صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسد الجسد كله. And if it is good, the rest of the body will be good. And if it is bad, the rest of the body will be bad. The rest of the body will be bad. And then he said, this definitely, no doubt, is the heart. So this is the third class, and we will skim through the first two episodes that we mentioned, and then we'll bring today that which we want to talk about, and that is the issue of coordination. And in Arabic they call this adraki ma'rif. That is when a person will deal with something mentally based upon his experience, based upon his senses, and based upon that which is from the issue of that which a person goes through in his or her life. So the first thing we mentioned, the first class, we mentioned the fact that the shaitan is behind all of these issues, and that Allah has made him an open enemy to mankind. And that this began when Allah Ta'ala decided to honor Adam. When he created Adam and he told Iblis along with the angels to prostrate to Adam. And this began the issue of Iblis saying that he's going to make fair semen to the human being and he's going to lead them all astray. So this was the first apex that we mentioned, showing that even when we talk about in the sense of people that have physical ailments, mental ailments, sometimes the jealousy leads the people to hostility because someone is healthier than they are. Or someone, as we gave the example, where Iblis said, is going to lead them all astray. So we gave the example, and we have many reports of this, where people, because of disobedience, they contracted the HIV virus that later turned into the AIDS virus. And because of disobedience, like Shaitan, Allah Ta'ala made him cursed and made him far removed from Allah's mercy. Like this, we have many reports where people have said, well, since I have the AIDS, I'm going to take as many as I can with Alhamdulillah. So this person goes around, وَيَزْنِي مَا خَمْسِينَ امْرَأَةٍ, makes zina with 50 ladies, purposely, without telling them that he has AIDS, because he has this mentality of the shaitan. He wants to take as many as he can down the road of destruction like the shaitan. So this is an example of how mental and spiritual illness and physical in this case plays out, because most of the time the people that have the HIV and the AIDS, of course this is a physical ailment. Then spiritually they have that which is a spiritual ailment because of the disobedience. As any disobedience is a spiritual sickness. Any major sin, أي كبائر من كبائر الذنوب يعني نعم يتبعوا يعني spiritual sickness, أمراض القلوب. And then physically they gain different sicknesses. The T cells break down, which the T cells normally are there to protect you from the common bacteria, the common colds, flus, pneumonia. So that break down, and it breaks down that person. So thus you see them with all three aspects of what we're talking about: a mental, a spiritual, and a physical sickness. at the least. So we mentioned that, and after that we mentioned the statement of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, the next bullet point, where he said, al-Islamu ma'allatun masalih al-khalq, that the Islam is the only superior thing to rectify and to fix the creation, meaning the human being. And this also includes the jinn, as Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونِ. I have not created them for any other purpose except to worship me, meaning to live in accordance to what Allah has revealed to them while they are alive, that is the jinn and the mankind. Then the second class, we mentioned the details of the last thing from the third bullet point that goes with what Imam al-Shafi'i said, being that Islam is the most superior thing. It is the only superior thing to rectify and to heal, and as a way of treating for the human being. Then we mentioned the 5 pillars of preservation. The 5 pillars of preservation. 5 things that you need to preserve. And that's in layman terms. And the Deen of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, it's called those things that are the maqasid al-sharia. Maqasid sharia. The 5 things that Allah sent the religion to preserve. And we said the first one was al-malu, the wealth. Allah sent the sharia, sent the legislation, sent the scripture, sent the Qur'aan and the Sunnah in order to preserve the wealth of the people. We know as it relates to the orphans, this is a clear thing. As I know the Shaikh went over that, Shaykh al-Tawbah, when he dealt with Surah An-Nisa, because this is one of the main issues dealt with in Surah An-Nisa, protecting the rights and the wealth of the orphan. So the wealth to be protected is a thing, and one of the 5 preservations, pillars of preservation. Your wealth must be protected, whether it be a little or a lot. Why? Because if not, then that wealth being misused, abused, or even squandered, it can lead, and will in most cases lead to some type of mental, spiritual, and maybe even physical ailment. Now, how many people we know that, wallahi, they lost hope because all of their wealth or assets were taken and depleted? How many people we know, and that is a fact, that they lost hope and trust in the Creator and what they believed, whether they believed right or wrong. They lost hope in what they believed because of the issue of being tested with their wealth. And then physically, how many people we know they suffer a physical ailment because of lack of sustenance, and this allows them the nutrition and those things to live a healthy life. So the first thing, the wealth, the mal, the assets that you have. And don't think of al-malu as just money, $50, $15, a check, a debit card, but anything that you could benefit yourself from, and that way that this is considered al-malu. Also, we like to mention this point, and that is, in many hadiths, this hadith was narrated. In the Bukhari and Muslim, the wealth comes first. But in other hadith, a demo comes first. In the Muslim, Imam Ahmad and others. So sometimes you may see the blood, which means the life, come first, and then other times you may see the wealth come first. Any way that it's mentioned, no problem. There's no right or wrong. All of them are right. Then the second thing we mentioned after wealth, we mentioned the ilm. Now, the honor of the person, The honor of the person. And the honor of the person, we said, is very important. It is something that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has placed in the religion. The Muslim have a good honor, and that person's honor must be protected and must be maintained, because again, with that of a tarnished honor, then it leads to mental, all types of psychological problems, that which is also spiritual problems, and it can lead to physical problems. Yeah, it can lead to physical problems. A person's not eating, that's a physical problem. A person has diarrhea, that's a physical problem. And that could be a kickback from the person's honor being attacked or being tarnished. And this is why Tabaraka wa Ta'ala constantly in his book consoled the Prophet and reminded the Prophet that he wasn't Sahib Majnoon, he wasn't a madman, he wasn't Kadab and Ashir, a lying poet, because this is important, the issue of preservation of a person's honor. Then we said the third thing from the 5 pillars of preservation, a person's mother, a person's life, a demo, the life of a person. And blood here, we said, doesn't mean you're protecting your blood from being tainted. As people have different blood types. We hear blood means your life. The life of the person is precious. As a Tabaraka wa Ta'ala gave you that life, and by that life you live, by that life you die, so the life must be protected. Then the fourth thing, huwa al-aql, al-aql, the intellect. And sometimes people have taken, he mentioned many of the fabricated hadith, such as the statement, in أول ما خلق إنما أول من الخلق العقل. From the first things indeed that was created, the aql. And so philosophers have taken that and said, if it's from the first things that are created, just as Salam mentioned, from the first things that were created, the qalam. From the first things that were created, the pen that Allah commanded to write. From the first thing that was created, the arsh. So this means they came first. And some scholars, they differ between which one came in sequential order. Was it the pen or the arsh? But whenever you hear this term, from the first things, this shows that thing is tremendous. So thus philosophers, they saw and they continue to seek to say the intellect, from the great thing that we have is the intellect, because it's the first thing that Allah created. But this is a fabricated hadith, and what makes me say that? Because the thing that must be protected is the aql, and the aql is that which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to be a source of guidance, a source of salvation, but it is not to be used to overstep the revelation. So here to protect the aql, as the Prophet mentioned, that the aql, the opposite of the one having the ability to reason and to discern information, is the one who's a majnoon. When the Prophet said, Rufi al-qalam an thalatha, the pen is lifted from 3, and one of them he said, al-majnoon hatta yaqil, the one who's temporarily or permanently insane, without the ability, meaning to reason, without the ability to rationalize, without the ability to discern between right and wrong, what's safe and what's dangerous. That person, Allah is not going to hold him or her accountable. The pen of deeds will not write until their state changes where they are with aql, meaning they can discern between right and wrong. They can determine, distinguish between what's safe and what's dangerous, and so forth. And then the last thing we mentioned, a deen, from the 5 pillars of preservation, a deen, a person's religion. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, man baddala deenahu faqatuluh. And this, the scholars, they mentioned this injunction was mentioned from the Prophet ﷺ, which is revelation. Whoever substitutes his deen, then he should be killed. And this is not for this time, day and time, renegades to assassinate or to persecute people based upon he's Muslim, he's not Muslim, she left Islam. But in a country where treason is part of the law, then in this case the Islam was similarly like that. And that's because those people that left the religion, they caused a mental disturbance in the Muslim community. They caused a spiritual disturbance in the Muslim community during that time of the Prophet, and it was a strategy in order to weaken the minds and the spirit and the physical actions and activity of the Jama'ah. Therefore, the Prophet mentioned, "Man baddala deenahu faqtuluh." Whoever substitute, leaves, changes the deen, then he should be executed. These were the 5 preservations of life in the last class we mentioned. And today, inshallah, we'll talk a little bit about condemnation, inshallah. They said in the books concerning psychology, and this also was in the Muslim books of psychology during the 4th and 5th and 6th century. Many of the scholars of Iraq wrote books about these issues, and they remain in the Arabic language. You don't have much of them in English, but I think there's maybe 1 or 2 that have been translated into English. And many of the concepts that Sigmund Freud and Darwin's theory and all of these people came up with, they mixed, from other sources with their theories, but they took a lot from the Muslim doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists during the time of their era. From amongst it, the issue of cognition. And cognition, they said it is the act of mental activity in which a person gains knowledge and understanding. So your mental capacity, if you use it to gain knowledge, understanding, and experience, then this is going to be something that a person is going to use his knowledge, his experience, his senses. And this is the mental state that the person has in order to gather that information. And that's why Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, you find him mentioned in the Qur'an, many of the ayah, such as Ya ayyuhan nas kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiban wa la tattabi'u khutuwat ash-shaytan innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. So Tabaraka wa Ta'ala started that ayah by addressing the whole humanity. So no one is left out. And Allah said, eat, kulu min. Eat from that, mimma fil ardi halalan, that which is here with us on earth, that is halal. But Allah could have kept going and went straight to وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ, and don't follow the footsteps of the devil. But Allah said, halalan tayyiban, what's good for you, what's wholesome. And so this is the issue of cognitive behavior and also cognition. Because mentally, in order to use your mental capacity, in order to have something of knowledge from your experience, from your senses, and from that which you have from what Allah Ta'ala gave you, then you have to be in a good state. And this is something we learn in the month of Ramadan. This is something we learn in the month of Ramadan, because when you fast, you find the mental action being keen. You'll find your senses being sharpened. And from your experience, each Ramadan is supposed to bring you closer to Allah Ta'ala, full circle, physically, mentally, and spiritually. So this way of acquiring knowledge by way of a person's mental capacity, this comes through his thought process first. And that's why Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala said, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنِ. Do not ponder upon the Qur'an. Ponder. Do not sit and reflect and think about it and analyze it and try to see how you fit into each ayat of the Qur'an. What's your role? How does it fit in your life and your society today? Do you not do that? Because that's the reason for the Qur'an. As many of the scholars, they talk about the ajr, the physical and spiritual reward for just reading. As the Prophet he mentioned the issue of man qara'a harfan min kitabillahi falahu hasana. Whoever reads a letter from the book of Allah will have a reward. He will have a single reward. Wa hasana ashra amthaliha, and each reward will be multiplied 10 times. That hadith scholars normally use it and talk about the physical and the spiritual reward for reading. But all of the scholars agree that the main reason that the Quran was sent down, one of them, to ponder, to use your mental capacity to analyze the Quran. A thought process by way of reading the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and stopping to reflect upon the ayah. That's why you have different narrations of the companions. Some of them, they will not go beyond 3 ayah until they understood it, practiced it in their life. And you have some narrations said 10. The point is the thought process. When you talk about cognition, the mental process by way of learning something from thoughts. So this shows you that as the issue of Ramadan, it's not just for, as many of the times we enjoy the festivity and the food and socialization, but the real benefit is in how you gain and what you benefit and thought process through this month of Ramadan. The next thing you experience, and this is the meaning of cognition, an active verb, meaning the act of mental benefit by way of thought, number 1. The act of mental benefit by way of thought. Number 2, the act of mental benefit by way of experience. So mentally you benefit in the month of Ramadan by way of thought. And that's why, wallahi, it is at least makruh, disliked highly. At most, haram to be involved in things that will distract you from the Qur'an, and from dhikr, and from wholesome speech, and things that are necessary to benefit you and your thought process along with your experience in this month. So the experience, and this is why it's a reoccurring issue for the believer. Every year, every next 11 months, it comes back around, because the issue of your experience. Now, your experience. Then your senses, the third thing, your senses. So the thought process is part of the term cognition, which means your mental abilities and your mental capacity, which allows you to learn and to have education by, number 1, thought process, tadabbur. Number 2, by your experience. Number 3, by your senses, idrak, what you sense, what you feel without having a flaw in it. You say, man, my first mind told me, to check in my bag for my keys. I knew it was in my bag. That's your senses. Or you feel like, you may be speeding and something tells you you better slow down. There may be a trooper around in this area. You start to see all of the cars, slow down, and you fly past everybody. If you get pulled over, the first thing you say, man, my first mind told me to slow down. So that's your senses. And in the month of Ramadan, as it relates to mentally, spiritually, and physically, your senses are more keener. What you smell, what you feel, what you think, what you understand, your issue of self-restraint and self-control becomes greater and more enhanced if you're following the procedures of Ramadan, because this is the third part of cognition, the mental process by way a person learns through thought process, number one. Number two, by his experience. And number three, by his senses. This issue encompasses a lot of aspects when you talk about cognition, how a person mentally will benefit through thought process, through his or her experience, and through their senses. When you talk about this process, it's a lot of components, and we will not go into those components because there are many. But one of them we will mention is the memory. The memory. The memory, the formation of knowledge, and the thought process. Those are the three things that, if we were to take them at the beginning of the issue, will be those three. Person's memory, thought process, and that person's ability to take that knowledge and apply it. And we understand that when we talk about the issue of mental health, this is one of the jobs of the specialist or the doctor or the therapist to help the one who has the mental illness to have a planned activity, how to carry that action out. And this is the same thing we learn in the religion. Allah Azza wa Jalla gives us a plan, but doesn't just leave us with the plan. He gives us a way to carry it out. So these are some of the lessons that when we break them down and we look at our fast in Ramadan, when we look at the everyday life and struggle of the human being, these three aspects are directly tied and indirectly tied to cognition. That is the knowledge that you gain mentally through thought process, through your experience, through your senses, and from amongst the different aspects that are required for those three things to take place. That is the thought process, your experience, for you to benefit from, and that which is due to a person benefiting in that way is the thought process. It's a process of knowledge, how the person gains that knowledge. Then it is how the person uses that knowledge, how a person uses that knowledge, and how the person understands that knowledge, how the person understands that knowledge. And this is the biggest part about healing in any way. You must have a thought process, you must have the knowledge to use it, and you must understand how to use that knowledge along with that medicine. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it beneficial for us and to give us a healthy and strong mental process by way we can ponder upon the ayat of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, by way that we can analyze ourselves and critique ourselves in order to become better. We ask Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala to free us from every sickness of the life of this world, whether it be that which is mentally, physically, or spiritually. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Ghafur Rahim, to forgive us for our shortcomings and shower His mercy upon us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yubarik fina fi hayatina wa ba'da mamatina. We ask Allah to bless us in our life and after our death. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His help. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. So, now we open the floor. today dealt with cognition. That means a person's ability to take their intellect, their mind, and to benefit from what they know from, number one, what they have from what? What was the first thing we said? To benefit from what? Thought process, from the thoughts, what they thought, from what they gathered from their thought process, right? So you benefit from what you have, that you understand, what you know from the thought process of knowledge, what you understand. And we know that if you have something and you don't use it, you will lose it. Now, the second thing is your what? Experience, you say. How can you benefit mentally from something that you learn? Action, barakallahu fi, action. So you learn something, and that thought process of thinking about it and correlating it to that which you understand, then the way you will use it is considered the using the cognitive knowledge that you have mentally by way of acting on that knowledge. The second thing, experience. How can we benefit from experience? Enhancement of senses through experience. How can we benefit, learn from experience? Memory, because you remember the experience, Yes, mashallah. And this is the same thing when they talk about this issue and when you have trauma, you know. Every time something reminds you of that trauma, then they say that becomes a trigger for you to set something off from your experience. So that could be in a good or a bad way. And then the last thing he said, senses, and he mentioned senses along with experience. How can you benefit from your senses? What does this mean? Idrak, your senses. Perception, very good. Perception. Or like some people, they say intuition. Yes. Now, a lot of times that's, based on a strong feeling, they say the gut feeling, but it's also based on what you coupled it with experience. And that's why in the mental health field, they line them up together. And the Sharia, they're lined up together. The issue of your experience and the senses, as Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned about Isa. فَلَمَّا أَحَسَ عِيسَى بِنْ الْكُفْرِ قَالَ مَنْ أَنْصَارِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. He felt from them, their kufr. So sometimes, people might call it an instinct, but it's a sense. You can feel it, and it has to be coupled with experience. Yes. And this is a very valuable lesson as it relates to how we should look at the Ramadan. The days of looking at it is just, it came and it went. No, you have to internalize, you have to be able to conceptualize this in a more psychomatic way, because it is, as you heard Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala say, so that you can gain piety. And part of the piety is mind over matter. Part of the piety is mind over matter. That's why Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala mentioned something over and over again in the Qur'an, so they could stay with us. But if we don't pick the Qur'an up, or we pick it up, we don't understand it. Or we pick it up, we don't read it. Or we pick it up, we don't try to see how it fits in our day-to-day life. It's an obligation to see how it fit in the first two generations. But it's also an obligation to see how it fits in our generation. Yes, in our life. So inshallah ta'ala, any questions, comments, or corrections? Question. Next Sunday class, we won't have class, we'll have it the following Sunday, because I'll be in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'll do the class there live, the masjid, Facebook, but it won't be هي إله الرحمن وفي الأمة العالم مع أفضل إن شاء الله تبارك وتعالى نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى يبارك فيكم صلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.